what you think might happen next?
Yeah, so I think that from the military point of view, it's very clear that both Israel and the United States have achieved very significant military achievements in their attempts to degrade as much as possible Iran's strategic capabilities. Mostly, I think, due to the aerial superiority achieved by both Israel and the US. So if you look at the ballistic missiles capacities, if you look at the aerial defense systems, even some of the remains of the nuclear program in Iran, and certainly the attempts to undermine or to degrade Iran's security forces, the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, the Iranian Navy, all is going quite well. The question at the end of the day is whether those achievements will allow to achieve the main objectives, which are, in my view, one, to degrade Iran's strategic capabilities up to a point where it's going to be very difficult for Iran to reconstitute both its nuclear program and its ballistic missiles, just as it tried to do after the 12-day war in June. And then the second objective would be to weaken and undermine the Iranian regime. So if we see the resumption of the protest movement after the war is over, it might be more difficult for the Iranian state to deal with that effectively.
Starting with the effective degradation of Iran's military and security capabilities. You said that's a question. What do you think the answer is there?
It's very difficult to say. I think that when it comes to the missiles, as you probably remember, during the 12-day war in June, Israel managed to destroy a lot of the launchers and then to block the entrances and the exits to the so-called underground compounds used to store missiles. If that happens again, I think it won't make any real difference because at the end of the day, Iran will be able to restore the production of its missiles. So either the United States is capable of targeting and hitting the underground compounds inside Iran, which store those missiles, and more importantly, to hit the production lines, which would make it much more difficult for Iran to do that. I certainly hope that the US military might is capable of doing at least part of that. Now, concerning the nuclear issue, here I think that if the war ends with those 450 kilograms of enriched uranium to 60%, if this fissile material still is left in Iran, I think it's going to be a very, very disturbing development, because Iran can still have the technical know-how and the capability to break out if it makes a decision to do that.
Let's just look at the new leadership emerging in Iran. Khamenei Jr., still no sign of him.
Right. There were some reports that he was actually injured during the first hours of the attack, but he was nominated by the Assembly of Experts, so we should assume that he's capable of fulfilling his tasks at least.
Okay, so you wouldn't read too much into this fact that we haven't seen him anywhere?
No, I think it's very obvious that the Iranian regime is fighting for its survival. They know very, very clearly that Mujtaba Khamenei might become the next target by either Israel or the United States, and so he should hide. The question, in my view, is whether he's capable of reaching out and continue his daily contacts with the political and security establishment inside Iran, because that's what matters, whether he's capable of preserving a kind of continuity in preserving the ability of the regime to function.
Which brings us nicely to the question, can the regime survive? Or what is needed for it not to survive?
The regime can certainly survive. I mean, this is a state which has developed for more than 47 years its ability through institutionalized multi-layer structure to survive. That's exactly what it's aimed for. I think that any kind of regime change in Iran, and we certainly hope for regime change in Iran, depends, in my view, on three main conditions. One is to see millions of Iranians in the streets, because otherwise it's going to be almost impossible, in my view, to topple the Iranian regime only through aerial strikes from above. The second condition would be to see some kind of coalition between different sections and parts of the Iranian society. You know, students, women, bus drivers, workers, ethnic minorities working together, if possible, with some kind of organization to be able to topple the regime. And last but not least, I would say that one condition for a regime change in Iran is to see some cracks and divisions and perhaps defections from within the security apparatus inside Iran. And that's something which is going to be very difficult to achieve because, as we know, the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, are very much dependent on the Islamic Republic. They know that if the regime collapses, they might pay the consequences for that. And so they will fight until the end, in my view.
Okay, and we're not seeing any cracks at the moment.
We might see some weakening of the command and control networks inside Iran. We might see some divisions between different sections of the military and political establishment inside Iran. But certainly we have not seen any kind of losing control. I mean, just yesterday I looked at information about checkpoints established by the Basij, by the law enforcement forces in Iran. We still have reports about the intelligence agencies in Iran arresting people for treachery or for cooperating with Israel. And so this is certainly a functioning state, at least at this point.
If the regime does survive, what's it going to be like?
I'm afraid that if the regime survives, and especially if it's under Mujtaba Khamenei, we might see an even more hardliner state, more committed to not just to continue the core strategic goals of Iran, meaning its missiles, nuclear, regional ambitions, but we might also see a regime which might take more risks in compared to Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. So, for example, we know that throughout the years under Khamenei, Iran was certainly moving forward towards reaching a nuclear threshold state, but Khamenei didn't make a decision to break out. My concern is someone like Mujtaba might take the risk of breaking out, especially after realizing that this might be the ultimate deterrence vis-à-vis Israel and the United States.
Again, if the clerical establishment does remain in command, in control, what will this mean for its relations with the Gulf states? Because post-war, that's going to be very different than it has been up till now.
So on the one hand, you can say that the Gulf states have finally realized perhaps that they should not trust the Iranians. By the way, I don't think that they trusted the Iranians before the war. But certainly the continued attacks by Iran on the Gulf states certainly serve as another indication that there is no way to improve the relations between the Gulf states and Iran without any limits. But I think that at the end of the day, they will realize that if this regime is still intact, they will have to live with that. And President Trump is not going to be here forever. I'm not sure if they can trust the Israelis, because some of them at least consider Israel as destabilizing force by its own. So their conclusion might be, okay, we might have to work with Israel, with the United States, to strengthen our defense systems vis-à-vis the Iranians, but we should try to find a way to accommodate with Iran, because Iran is here to stay, because the Islamic Republic might here to stay, and we have to maintain as much friendly relation, or at least concrete relation with Iran as much as possible.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.